Hi, everybody. Mitch Tanenbaum here. Thanks for joining me today. This is the security news update for October 22nd, 2023. I have a bit of a cough today, so I'm going to try to do this relatively quickly. Um, Under the Privacy and Security Alerts Department, apparently some large number of Android devices, and these are not really Android, these are really more like Internet of Things devices, come with a present, which is a backdoor. A researcher discovered a inexpensive Android-based TV streaming box purchased on Amazon, comes with a hidden backdoor that calls China. Not completely surprising. Um, the firm who found this, called Human Security, uh, purchased these devices on Amazon, and they found seven models. Though they didn't look very hard. Also a tablet. They said maybe 200 different models are affected. But bottom line, these Internet of Things, from a security standpoint, are where computer security was, say, 20 years ago. And nobody's really watching. Nobody's really watching these things. They just like them. They're cheap. They're easy to install. Um, they do what they say they're going to do, plus a few other things that they didn't say they were going to do. And as a result of that, people like them. Um, if you're not already isolating your Internet of Things devices from the rest of your network, whether it's a home network or whether it's a corporate network, you really need to do that because these things are just not trustworthy. Um, and if you need help with that, obviously, please reach out to us. Next, in the reference department, the EU Data Governance Act went into effect last month, and there's also this thing called the Data Act, which is coming up quickly behind it. The Data Act is not quite fully baked yet, but the DGA, the Data Governance Act, is designed to encourage the sharing of certain kinds of data. Um, the Europeans are always so creative. Um, they're talking about data that is held by public sector bodies. That's what we would call the government. Um, Data intermediation services. That's what we would call a data broker. Uh, Data altruism, which is an interesting concept. Basically, you should voluntarily share your data because you're a good guy. And in fairness to them, they want to restrict that to like nonprofits and stuff like that, maybe, but that will get abused very quickly. Um, but also to make sure that the data is protected from foreign authorities. That would be us, the United States. Um, and if U.S. companies obviously want a piece of that pie, whichever side of the equation you're on, then you need to follow their rules. So, in the newsletter, there's a overview of that from Alston Bird, the big law firm. In the important issues and patches department, for those of you who like Unix or Linux, there's a utility called curl, very, very popular. This is probably the worst bug that they've seen in a decade or more. Um, and but they're not alone. Amazon just patched their open source tool Torch Server, which is used by AI developers. Um, in the case of Torch Server, because of the way it works, it will likely require to rebuild systems and containers to fix it. So just FYI. Next, Microsoft follows in Apple's footsteps. They patched multiple 0 days. Like Apple beat them by a week. They did it last week. So that's kind of good because that means the patching is offset one from the other. Um, in this particular case, Microsoft patched 4 0 days that are already being exploited. One of them is fixing a protocol hole in HTTP rapid response that's being used in DDoS attacks. So, uh, that's important to go fix that one, I would say. Um, Next, in the legislative and EU legal activities, sorry, the EU is warning Elon Musk that X is failing its misinformation test regarding the Israel-Hamas war. Um, the EU sent a letter to Musk suggesting that Musk needs to update X's content enforcement policies. Uh, the media is already reporting that misinformation is running rampant on X. Musk, in his normal ornery manner, says, "Well, prove it." Um, and they'll go back and forth for a while, and then he'll do whatever he does. But fundamentally, I think the EU has the upper hand here. It may take a while to get their arms around it because they can find anybody who's in violation of um, the this law that they can fine them up to 10% of their revenue, or they could even just block them, which is something Twitter does not. Neither one of those is something that Twitter needs right now. Also, in the insider threat department, yet another government employee or former government employee got caught stealing and selling information, in this case classified. Um, I don't think we're actually seeing more people stealing stuff. I actually think that the government is getting better at finding these guys, which is a great thing. Um, this particular guy, Joseph Daniel Schmidt, is accused of trying to sell stuff to the Chinese. He'd been hiding out in China for a while. For whatever reason, I don't exactly understand why. They don't say. Um, he came back to San Francisco, where the feds were ready to meet him at the airport with a bright, shiny pair of stainless steel bracelets, aka handcuffs. If he's convicted, and I suspect the odds of him being convicted are, high 90s, um, he will be potentially sentenced to up to 10 years in federal prison. So I hope he got a lot of money, which the indications are he did not. And we see this a lot with folks that sell things to the enemy, risking espionage charges and being in jail for a long time, paying hundreds of thousands of dollars of fines, and they get 3,000, 5,000, 10,000. It's like, if you're going to do this, this is a business, and you're putting yourself at risk. You better get paid a lot, and the money better be socked away in a place that the feds can't find it. Unfortunately, I don't think that's what most of these guys do. Uh, in the education department, CISA, along with its partner agencies, FBI, NSA, and Treasury in this case, um, released a really great document, which I recommend, called Securing Open Source Software in Operational Technology and ICS Industrial Control Systems. Um, and operational technology powers everything from power plants to fuel to water, sewage, rail, just air travel, all of it. So the strategy historically has been that we hope that open source software was not buggy, but the reality is that's not the case. So it's really important that whether you are in critical infrastructure or not, that you go have a good plan for how do we go off and make sure that to the best of our ability that open source software is safe. Next, in the Move It debacle, which seems to be never ending, the victim count now is over 2,500 organizations. The number of victims is over 65 million. A goodly chunk of those, maybe more than half, close to 60% probably, are third parties. And it's sort of interesting because Progress Software that makes Move It says they've only spent $2.9 million on the breach, 1.9 million of which is covered by insurance. And that's because most of the heavy lifting is being done by all the companies that they sold their software to. Um, as a pure example, made up hypothetical number, if each of these companies spent 50 grand on forensics, notifications, PR, mitigations, updating software, which I think is probably low, the total cost might accurately be reflected as $50,000 times 2,546 customers is about 127 million bucks, which is probably much more realistic, although still probably low. Among the new breach companies are Sony and Flagstar Bank. Progress Software said in an SEC filing that it expects to incur a $4 million cost from a separate breach into their corporate network last year. But I think the big news here is that they've also said that 23 customers have started legal actions against them. So let's say one of their customers is IBM, and let's say IBM spent $1 million or $2 million or 5 million, whatever the number is. They're going to go to Progress and say, reimburse us. So we're not going to know the true cost of this to Progress for years and years. The other thing is that there's also, separate from those 23 customers who are suing them, there is 58 class action or potential class action lawsuits pending against them that have been filed by individuals. So, by the time this is all done, the number is going to be a big number. We just won't know what it is for several years. In the breach department, Air Europa says cancel your credit cards, which is probably the smartest thing that anybody says after a breach. They say that the credit card number, the CVV number, and the expiration date, which in theory they should not be storing, were stolen. But you shouldn't worry because they've secured their system now. Well, would have been nice if they had secured it like before instead of after, but not to worry. At least that's what they say. Anyway, here's an interesting breach. 23andMe leaked data on a little bit over 1 million people, specifically of Ashkenazi and Chinese descent. Not exactly sure why that is, but I have a thought. They're saying this is not really a breach, which if what they're saying is true, I agree with them. They say that the hackers noticed that people don't change their passwords after breaches, and they reuse passwords. So there's an attack known as a password stuffing attack, where basically you just go off and try passwords that were exposed on breaches at other sites. And since most people don't do two-factor authentication because it is inconvenient, once the hacker has a password that was compromised in a different breach, then they can go off and use that to break into another website based on your stuff. In this particular case, because of some features that 23andMe have, it's not only your data that gets leaked, but also the data of all your relatives, both near and distant relatives. And your distant relatives may not be happy to have gotten their DNA leaked because some distant relative has bad cyber hygiene. I don't think relatives are going to sue each other, but they may not send Christmas cards to each other after this. Next, NSO's Pegasus spyware has been in the news a lot over the last year or two. But it turns out they have cousins, actually many of them, many cousins. And this particular one, which is now coming into the light, it's an unrelated cousin, of course, has been around for more than a decade now. And it does equally nasty things that Pegasus does. It just has been doing it quietly. So we're probably going to see more of these be exposed as the media finds out about it. Because NSO Group was not alone in what they're doing. Next, AI at its best, or maybe not at its best. And I predict we're going to see more of this during the 2024 election cycle. A UK leader was targeted with fake audio posted to Twitter. Now, let's assume you're a world leader or a world leader wannabe, and assuming someone wants to take you down, they can use one of these AI-based services and some samples of your voice to create an audio clip of supposedly of you doing something that you wouldn't want to do, or in fact you didn't do. And now you're going to spend a lot of effort trying to explain to people that this clip of you doing whatever this dastardly thing is not really you. So I suspect we'll see a lot of that. We've already seen this. This particular clip was of a person who's running for the UK Prime Minister, but I suspect we'll see that in the US. Next, Twitter is not the only social media to get targeted by the EU Digital Services Act. They're also going after TikTok for the same thing, basically not doing a very good job of filtering stuff. So I think we're going to see more of this. The Digital Services Act just went into effect. So I kind of think they're feeling their way with that. And last, the security news bites for the week. Utah, uh, it's entertaining. I'm sorry. Utah is suing TikTok for getting children addicted. Now, mind you, uh, Facebook and Snapchat and all apparently those are not addictive because after all, um, they're not suing them. And parents have nothing to do with teaching their kids about how much time to spend on social media or not spend on social media. It's TikTok's fault. Anyway, we'll see where this lawsuit goes. Hackers are finding new and larger ways to launch denial of services attacks. One of the patches that Microsoft released this month is to try to stem the vulnerability, which is a protocol vulnerability. It's not a bug. Um, in this attack. We'll see how effective that is. Microsoft is deprecating one of hackers' favorite tools, VB-Script, but as is typical with Microsoft, they don't want to hurt anybody, break anything, so they're going to leave it kind of enabled for a while. But very quickly, you'll be able to remove it. So if you're not using anything that uses VB-Script, you might want to do that sooner rather than later. Next, the old but good Facebook copyright scam is intensifying, and people are getting sucked into it and giving the bad guys money. And lastly, big surprise, critical infrastructure is again the target of attacks. In this particular case, this is a pretty nasty attack. They're cutting undersea cables and poking holes in undersea gas pipelines, and that potentially is going to take months to fix. So that's a real problem. So obviously, if you need any help with any of this, we are available to do that. And until next time, stay safe.
Turnkey Cybersecurity and Privacy Solutions offers the complete cybersecurity program for small to medium-sized businesses. They include everything needed to secure your business and meet compliance requirements. Visit our website at turnkeycybersecurityandprivacysolutions.com to learn more.